Well, the high school basketball playoffs are upon us. We're joined by none other than West Central Sports, the sports director, Sean Larken, talking all about girls and boys playoffs coming up in Vernon Parish. What a season for your neck of the woods. I feel like there's anywhere between 5 and 8 true championship contenders that can get to Hammond or down the road in Lake Charles.
I've said it every year since I've been back, and I ask all the coaches to just kind of comment on it. The talent level of championship basketball in our area, just within the 50-mile radius, is arguably as good as anybody in the state. Every time our area is represented well at Hammond, Burton's the same way, and it looks to be the same way this year. I mean, it's crazy. It's just every single year. Sometimes it's the same groups as we'll talk about. Sometimes a couple of new programs get in there that hadn't been in a while. So it's fun. I mean, it's been a great year. Can't believe it's already over almost.
I know. Let's talk about the girls' side of things first. They get started this week. Most of the good teams will start in the week after. Class B, it has just been this awesome race between Fairview and Pitkin. Looks like Pitkin will be the 2 seed, Fairview the 3 seed. They play twice in the regular season. Back and forth game at Fairview's place. They pull away late. Then you and I were both there for the rematch at Pitkin, and Pitkin was up, I think, 1 or 2 points at the beginning of the second quarter. Fairview goes on a 16-0 run, and the game's over from there. What have you seen between those two programs and this basically this arms race this year that has led to this point?
Yeah, so look, last year, going back to last year, the 4 out of B were, I believe it was Bell City, Oak Hill, Anacoca, and Fairview. And obviously Coach Parker's gone at Anacoca. They lost a good bit of their team. Fairview lost arguably the best point guard in the area with Reese Jinks. I mean,
one of their best players.
Ran the show for half a decade, basically. Bell City didn't. Bell City pretty much brought everyone back. They lost a senior. So when I walked out of there that night after Fairview won another one, what seems like just adding to it, I said, Bell City's probably going to be back and win the whole thing. And I just personally walking out of there seeing what everybody was bringing back. However, like you said, we get to this year and it's just another cog in the wheel for Fairview. Coach Jinks, I mean, you were there last week. It wasn't close after the first quarter with Pitkin, but then you talk about Pitkin, a team that's kind of been building into this for 3 or 4 years now. Coach George has done an excellent job of building that program, and he's had that group of girls now going through this for a few years. They were banged up a little bit last year, and unfortunately they're kind of banged up again. They're not the same team as they were about a month ago, I guess, but what I saw the other night, Thursday night, they went to South Beauregard, a team that hadn't given up more than 37 points, I think, one time, and that was to an Iowa team who's one of the top teams in Division II, not select. They torched them. They gave up 80, and Pitkin hadn't shot the ball that well in a while. If they can bottle that up, like you said, it's them, it's Fairview, it's Bell City at 1, and then you even go down to a team that I saw this past Friday night. Anacoca on senior night had been kind of up and down all year, hadn't played as good as they could have played. They put it all together against a team who we saw at Pitkin just run them out of their own building. They get Fairview, they get on them early. They never trailed. Fairview had the ball with a chance to take the lead once. And that's a team at 9 that if, with the size they have, if they can play like they played the other night in this, they could be right back there like they were last year.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Starting with Pitkin and Fairview, as I was preparing for this interview for the last couple of days, ready to talk about, has Pitkin taken a step back from that long win streak they had about a month or so ago? But then they go on the road and beat Southbow. And then for Fairview, they're on this long winning streak twice. They beat Pitkin twice, and they stumble on the road against a very good Anacoca team. So if those two teams were to play again a third time around, in Hammond, what are some of the factors that would decide that game? Because people will say, Kyle Jinks said this to me, I'll put it on record, that it's hard to beat a team 3 times. That's why, that second game was kind of so important for both of them.
And we've talked about this, me and you, right? It is hard.
Is that true?
But when, the better team is going to win 3 times because they're the better team, right? I'll start by saying this Pitkin team now, the one I saw Thursday, that's the best they've played in a month. They've had one of their seniors go down. Jocelyn Johnson went down right after the Lafayette Christian game, out for the season. You probably saw the video of senior night. They got her in, laid it up.
That was an emotional
She's
moment.
one that spaces the floor, and she can get hot. She can knock down 5 or 6 in a row. They've been missing that. I think Lexi Strother was out. She came back last Monday on senior night and then played a lot and played well at South Bow. So, look, they're not going to have Joss to kind of space the floor. And The thing with Fairview, and this has been the Achilles heel, I guess, for him forever, even though it's not an Achilles heel because he's got enough for 2 hands. He's got enough for 2 hands and like a couple of toes as well. But everybody will talk about the size. They don't have size, and when you see them off the bus, they don't scare anybody. However, the game we were at Pitkin, Gracie Lejeune came off the bench and she was the difference maker in the game as far as altering shots underneath. I think she had 6 blocks, and more just kind of altering shots and making them think about her being there. She comes off the bench. She played the other night. It was big on big in Anacoca. They had Emma Hyatt, who had 20 in the game, had 11 in the fourth quarter. So that's the kind of thing with size. They could kind of control the game. But, we talked about it. Watching that game Friday night, Fairview never led. They tied the game twice. They were down 10-0 in the first quarter. And they never really played well, but there was still that they may make a run. Like I always kind of thought, like you have to play so well against them. You've got to protect the basketball. They're never going to, let you dictate the game. If they're down 10 or they're up 10, they're going to run and get shots up. So you just kind of have to play with them. You have to rebound. Anacoca did a pretty good job rebounding the other night. Pitkin is a little bit, undersized, but that's why that Gracie was the difference maker when we were there the other night. Pitkin's going to have to make shots like they did at South Bow and take care of the basketball, because if you don't, you've seen it enough. I mean, the lead gets from it was a 2-point game at Pitkin in the first quarter. Then they go up 9, and then you may get it back down to 6. Well, then it's 11. And then if you don't make a couple of shots or you don't get back on defense, it's 15. Next thing you know, it's 25, and then the game's over. It's just going to come down to, obviously, this is, easy and simple. It's a shot-making sport, right? You got to make shots to stay with them because they're going to make shots just off of volume. But, that's what District 4B, you said it, like you saw those 2 teams play and then Anacoca beats them. That's why, Class B in general, just that district alone, Hicks is really good, and they're just young, but they can.
They got 7th and 8th graders
they beat Anacoca.
Across their starting lineup.
They played at Anacoca. I did the game there, and they won that game at Anacoca. And then you look and you're like, well, how did that happen if Anacoca beats Fairview? It's just because you've got to be ready, and I think that's what especially in B, when I see all of our teams in the area get down there, it's because they don't have to go down the road or go up to Shreveport or New Orleans, even though they still do, just to kind of get a different gauge of how teams play. But that's why they're always ready, because they play these highly contested games every week and twice a season in district plus out of the tournaments. Like they're ready. There's nothing they haven't seen, and it's always competitive. So they're not just running the clock on everybody every week, and then you get down there to Hammond where it's a 6-point game with 3 minutes left. They don't know how to respond. All these teams have been prepared, and I think that's on the coaches and it's on the players of just being able to execute because of the talent we have around here.
I think the biggest thing, and especially the second Fairview Pitkin game, I'm sure it happened in the first also, offensive rebounding. Fairview getting a ton of extra possessions, those corner crash outs, which you'll see a lot of these NBA coaches say, hey, if you're in the corner, go get the offensive rebound. Pitkin, or Fairview for that matter, was getting a ton of those and extra possessions, able to grow the lead there. I think that it could easily be that Monday or Tuesday in Hammond, and Pitkin Fairview is one of those primetime games. And the winner against Bell City is a very good team. That's going to be a tough challenge for even Fairview, who beat them last year. But I think that's going to be a ton of fun in that race.
Yeah, look, at the moment it seems to be they're going to be 2 and 3. Pitkin at the 2 and Fairview at 3. So, if things play out the way they're supposed to, they will be in Hammond and play each other for a third time.
And Pitkin's got to get there.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
They both have to get there.
Fairview, that's their second home.
Look,
I think Jinx is a mailing address at that gym.
Yeah, well, I say it's just the Kyle Jinx Invitational, and everybody else just comes and hangs out and tries to do their best. I think I'd said it after we went off the air the other night, because Fairview was on a 9-game winning streak going into that season finale, and they didn't play very well, and I'm sure he would tell you that, very animated if he could. But I wouldn't want to be the team that has to play them in the first playoff game
No.
After that, because
whoever
they're
that's
going to
gonna
have
be
a couple of, a week or so to kind of sit on that, and it didn't leave a good taste in their mouth.
And that's good for those Class B teams if you're, I think, see like 1 through 8, where you get this like extended rest almost, where the season is so long, they're playing games all summer long.
Yeah, I was going to say, go back to summer. They're playing 40 and 50 games.
There's not a lot of time where you have like 10 to 14 days off. Like, these teams are going to be as fresh as they've been. I know Pitkin has their injuries, but as fresh as they've been since October.
Yes, since
and that's going to be a
probably
factor.
Christmas break or something.
I mean, it's crazy. Let's go down to Class C, where it is just talking about the Invitational, the Simpson Lady Broncos. Before we even talk about what the tournament's going to look like for them, just the way they've gotten here and how Lindsay has built that program up. Last year, it was just this special year. They lead the whole state in wins. They win the title in dominant fashion the final 3 rounds. And then this year, it could have fallen back, taken a step back. I think Pat Riley talked about this in his book about like the wanting more. Every team wants more after they win the championship. Simpson is the opposite. They play unbelievable team basketball. Lindsay has done such a good job there, and they're even better than they were last year in my mind.
Yeah, look, this didn't just start kind of last year. So this is my 5th year being back. And that first year I was here, they were in a district with Hicks, who finished off winning 4 in a row. They had Hornbeck, who also made it to Hammond my first year, and then Evans was a team that was like right on the outside of going, losing. I think they lost in the quarters, and then you had Simpson with a bunch of 7th and 8th graders named Olivia Edwards, and all those groups there, and they would just. I mean, I tell this story. I've probably told it 10 or 15 times. And they're just getting hammered. I mean, because you're playing Hornbeck and Hicks twice a year, and they're down 25 and 30, and they're crashing into the wall, saving the ball.
Which they still do every game.
Exactly, but you look at that then, and you look at it now, like you said, they're still doing it, but that's where it started, because they took their lumps all those years ago, and 2 years ago they lost at Pitkin when it was Division 5. They had B and C together. They went on the road, lost to Pitkin after winning a playoff game, and you could tell they just weren't ready. Like, it wasn't, they got that experience on the road. It was kind of a physical game. They weren't quite ready. And then I remember texting her in the summer, or even after the game, I think I said, okay, next year Hammond, no excuses. And I mean, obviously, they went 44-2 or something last year, and just the way they did it, it was really cool to see kind of from when it started to now. And then, like you said, you look down the roster last year after they're getting the trophy, and there's not like a senior on there.
Freshman, sophomore, junior,
there's
sophomore.
Not a senior on there, and the rest of Class C is probably thinking, oh, man, that's not good for us. Because here they are right back, and you talked about it. How do you come back after winning? Because, look, in professional sports, it's different, right?
Yep.
Like, there's a lot of people that have won 1, but there ain't a whole lot that have won 2, 3, 4. In high school, like, this is pretty much all you can do is win in high school. Like, you win a state championship. There's nothing else. Like, we won.
Like the accolades, you could be all state.
Like, you can get that.
But holding up that trophy at the end of the year is what you play for.
And then you've done it.
There's no incentive. There's no you don't get extra money.
You don't get money winning it again. So what do you do? Like, what is the motivation? And I've asked her about it. And how do you keep them engaged? Because look, these are some of hers were like 12, 13, 15, 17-year-old kids. Like, what do you do to motivate? And she's, the schedule's tougher. They've got some great wins on the schedule. We talked about it off air before. I mean, they've beaten Iowa. Look, they've gone down and played Lafayette Christian and won that game. Like, they beat Tioga the other day. These are wins that you're not going to see a whole lot of talent like that. And no offense to the rest of Class C, because it's just not there. And they've just done exactly what I expected them to do again. And it's been pretty fun to watch because, like you said, you see them, and from 5 years ago, them hustling on loose balls. And I think there was a video you had at Tioga with Livy chasing down a block. Like, what are we doing? We don't have to do that up 20.
And there's like 5 of those a game.
Yeah, like, you don't have to do that. You're up 15, 20, but like that's in their DNA now. And it's been that way from 5 years ago. And look, we can, we'll talk about the rest of C, but I told you before that there's only one team I think this year, and that's no disrespect to anyone else. There's only one team that's going to be in Simpson's way, and it's them. It's Simpson.
I wonder how much of it you talk about the motivation, the incentives is like legacy. Or I wonder how much. I mean, I've never had this conversation with them before, but you go into that gym, you see their banners or their frames and plaques all up there. But like the thought of, and I don't want to jump like too far ahead, but the thought of potentially 3 straight championships with this core, these juniors and sophomores and seniors, like. I don't think that's ever been done at that school, or like a school in that area that's not coached by Kyle Jinks. I know Hicks had
and Hicks had 4.
And Rose Pine had their back-to-back, which we'll talk about in a second. But like now that they have the chance to do 2, and then maybe next year 3, we'll see how things go in the next 2 weeks or so. How do you think the tournament is going to look for them? Where last year was kind of their first time at it, where they were the 1 seed, and that was their first time actually making it to Hammond. Now, tournament experience on their back. No, it's not the pressure they had in that first playoff game against Evans last year, where it was ugly. They held on and won by 9 points. What are you looking for them?
Yeah, and look, we can talk about Evans as well, a team that it's been a minute since they've been as solid as they are with that group. They coach Nortman in her first year coming from East Bo's done a great job, and they played the other day for the district title. And I think that Simpson group, like you said, they've seen everything now. Playing in the state semifinal and the state championship, they know what they had to do, and they took care of business. And they'll be back there again. And like it's just you see, you've done it all, and how are you going to do it again? Look, you get down there, you're going to probably. I think Evans possibly at the 4 right now. That's a familiar opponent. It's impressive that. Like you said, how many have won 2 or 3? And look, they're going to have 5 seniors after this year be
next
gone.
Year. There's a lot of work that's going to be done this summer in the offseason.
Yeah, it'll be a whole different look. For the rest of Class C, thank God the Simpson Lady Broncos are going to graduate a few. But even those 5, like I don't know. I think the last time they won it was 2001. I didn't go back and look enough in the gym. I guess I should have.
Next time we go there,
I'm gonna have to look and may get a text after this show. But that senior class, hey, how many at Simpson have gone back to back? And they're gonna be in that group. And when this is, a long ways from now, but 15, 20 years or 5 to 10 years down the road, they're gonna walk in that gym with their kids and say, look, there's your mom on there, names on there twice, and then next thing you know, you're 15 years down the road, our kids, or their kids are playing and trying to do the same thing.
Especially like in a town like that, where it's like, I feel like a lot of people who live there have grown up there.
They don't move in, man. No. Let me tell you, and that's no offense to those small places. They don't move in. Like they got 10 toes down, and those kids play under probably the same coaches for years. And like you said, they're going to be trying to keep that legacy going, and that's after you've won it once. And that's anywhere too, but especially in these smaller, communities. Like you win it once, it's pretty special. But like to be able to try to do it back to back, man, like they talk about that stuff for 20, 30 years from now. I remember when so and so did this, and man, and you go into the corner store over there, and they'll say, man, the old guy that's been working there for 30 years, man, I remember watching your mom play, and that's just how it goes, and it's pretty cool to see. And
when I filled out my all-son-in-law girls ballot earlier this weekend, Livy Edwards, one of the first names written on there, and the fact that we get another year for her is special. And then, Bella Honeycutt, Ashlyn Elaine, Cody Miller, Rollins, like there's a lot of player on that first or second team. It's how good that team is, and they're so deep.
And so, I don't want to just, talk about the things they do well, because last year going in, the thing that kind of concerned me a little bit about what they did, it's not that they don't shoot it from outside well. They just didn't really do it a whole lot.
No, they're such a fast break team.
Because obviously Ashlyn and Lane can do it. Like they have one.
One of the best.
And you need one. Like you need one. But they get into that state championship game against Summerfield, and I think Cody Miller hits one, or maybe 2 in a row. Yeah. And I just knew, that was 2 minutes in. I thought, well, this is a wrap. That's the one flaw that, like I said, even though the flaw with Coach Jinks is, well, I may get a runner-up instead of a championship, maybe they don't have the size. If you want to nitpick something that you could maybe catch Simpson on, it's it's, maybe they don't shoot it as much outside, but that's the thing, good luck trying to get them to.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't
Good
have
luck
to.
trying to slow down that offense to the point where they have to settle for
Yeah,
those
like,
jumpers.
because the moment they do that, she's probably going to yank somebody off the bench to go in and say, that's not what we're going to do. But it's not that they can't do it. But you want to look and see, like, well, what do they do well, or what do they maybe not, do as much? And it's more of they don't shoot it outside. But like I said, they don't have to. Good luck if you can get them to do that, then you may be in the game.
Let's talk Rose Pine Girls, a team that won back-to-back titles in 23 and 24, 25. They get to the semis and lose a real back-and-forth great game. I was there for the Sacred Heart loss, and I don't know what the expectations were going into this year, if it was going to be back to that state championship level, but I don't think I can name a team in the area who has gotten better as the season has gone on compared to them. And Casey James, just breakout player, as one of the best players in Vernon Parish. And maybe in the state.
So this would be the fifth straight year to go, because the first year I was here, they lost in the semi. They actually shouldn't have. They should have been at least a runner-up. Kind of had a lead go late, and they just come back and they win back-to-back. And then, like you said, last year, you lose what you did. I mean, there's not a whole lot of teams that would, get back to Hammond, just because, the production, you had Kelly, Addie, and Nevaeh, and they've been starting since 8th graders.
Yeah.
So again, that thing's kind of been building. But then they get back last year, and I can say just by watching it, you were there. Look, no disrespect to Sacred Heart because they got the job done, but I've said a lot. If there were 5 more minutes on that clock, I think Rose Pine wins. And if they played the game 19 more times, I think Rose Pine probably wins 19. It just wasn't their night. Coach Kylie, I think, said it in the post game. So you go back to this year because they did lose arguably the best perimeter defender in the area with Amaya Shine last year. So how are you going to do that? Because she was so good on the ball, and then she made it go. They've changed some stuff around. They had some transfers that were out last year be able to play. But the name you mentioned was Case James. Case is, to me, the one that kind of makes the whole thing go, because if she knocks shots down, they want to get out and run. But if in the half court, you said there's not a team that's gotten better as the season progresses, probably more than them. And I would agree, because at the beginning of the year, early, they weren't shooting it very well. But if, like you've seen, if she can go and get hot, and if Raylan Ferris can get hot, they will run you out of there just as quick as anybody, because they look to run. Obviously, they would love to just get it, and that's kind of how they were able to beat Simpson. They would just get back quickly and get a layup on the other end, and look, and as good as Simpson is, they still had a chance there.
Yeah.
But when they're able to knock shots down, and like you said, Case had 36 the other night. I think she had 27 a week or 2 before. So she's shooting it well. And look, like we said earlier, it's a make or miss game for anybody, especially them, though. If that was the problem in Hammond last year, I don't think Case shot it very well. I don't think any of them shot it very well.
That was a very low scoring
game.
It was. 36, 33.
It was an awful game. I don't think they made a whole lot of free throws in the game either. But if they made shots, they want to press you and force the turnover and get out and just have an easy layup. Well, to do that, you've got to make shots to go in the basket and make them inbounded under the rim. And then you can set up. When they started doing that against Sacred Heart late in that game, it looked like a high school team playing against a little dribblers team. They just ran out of time. Obviously, if when the brackets are going to come out, those two teams are going to be matched up, and if it all goes the way we expect, they will play again.
Sacred Heart is number 1.
They are 3. And Rose Pine is 2.
Who is 1 in that bracket?
Lafayette Christian, the team that has won it about 42 times in a row.
And that's a great team right there. So what do you, now as the tournament kind of is unfolding, Menard is one of our teams.
Yeah, they're in there as well.
They're number 4, I think.
I believe so.
They're on the fringes between 4 and 5.
But,
other side of the bracket, but
that's an old district foe for Rose Pine as well.
Yeah, that's a very good. What's it going to take for Rose Pine to win that against LCA, who's won it a million times, and Sacred Heart, who had their number last year? What are the expectations?
And you had said it earlier. What's the motivation and where do they expect to be? Coach Kylie, look, I graduated from Rose Pine. If people didn't know,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I talked to him a lot, and just obviously I'll cover everybody in the area, but there may be a little bias there if I'm not even supposed to say that. But I love everybody in our area.
It's okay.
He told me during football season on the air, he came in at halftime, right when I think a week before they were getting ready to start. he said, this is no disrespect to anybody else. He said, we are practicing and we are playing to play LCA. And that was in October. And that was probably how it was in the summer. He said, we are trying to get conditioned and practice like, to be ready for them.
And they didn't play in the regular season?
Nope, they did not. Pitkin played them,
yeah.
and
Simpson played them?
Yeah, so they didn't play. I think they'd played maybe 2 years ago or the year before, or last year maybe, but not this year. And look, they've won it, I think, 5 times in a row. They won 4 with Jada Richard and then won it last year. So obviously, they're the cream of the crop in Division III Select. But you just look at what happened last year, and I think after winning back-to-back, that the expectation, and I could say this now because it's over, but the first, I think, Summer League game last year with them, it was awful. Like it looked bad. You could probably ask every one of them, ask him, it didn't look good. And then it got better. I mean, they got better as the year went on, and obviously they fell just short, but they probably should have been a runner-up at worst. And, that kind of eats on you a little bit in the offseason, and they've had the same motivation this year. They scheduled tough just like everybody else because you kind of have to. You want to be in that 2, or you don't want to be in the 4 spot. You want to be in the 2. And look, like I said, the area is good enough to where they don't even have to go anywhere if they don't want to. But they've went up and played, I think, at Benton. They played at the Tioga tournament. They played at Ash. It's just going to come down to making shots. If they make shots, as far as getting to him, and there's not going to be anybody better than them if they just can play well, play defense, and just make enough shots. There's not going to be anybody that'll trip them up there. Now, when you get there, all the motivation you need is from a year ago. Just, this is the team that knocked you out, that had an opportunity for you to, at least play for a state championship. When you get in there, it's just whatever happens, happens. And I think, look, with that group last year, they had 3 starters that were gone, actually 4 starters that graduated. And there were a lot of players that didn't really step on the floor, in that moment before. So there were a lot of new players, like Amaya and Haley played. But you didn't have a whole lot of others that were out there. That's going to change this year. Yeah. You've got everybody but 1 starter that didn't play last year. And that's a big deal, man. When those lights come on, the depth perception in there is a little bit different than a high school gym.
It's a lot different than these local small schools.
You're not going with the back padding on the wall and, the senior pictures on the back wall. Like there's seats, there's students back there.
A lot more cameras, a lot more.
It's a lot more of everything. Yeah. Like, it's not just roll it out there, do the national anthem, go. And it's bells and whistles. It's, pregame stuff. They'll interview you possibly. They'll interview you after. They're going to be ready for that. Just kind of like Simpson, like we said. They did a great job last year of just going in there and just blowing the doors off everybody.
They were there. They brought their basketballs.
They acted like,
can we just play?
Yeah, let's just play and get out of here, and then we'll be back next year. But look, that's a thing, man. Like experiencing that, and we say that Fairview rolls out 7th graders every time that just go in there, and it's just another sense. But yeah, I think the experience for them this year is going to help a lot. And like I said, the motivation of losing last year to possibly the same team that you're going to get to play this year. I mean, what else do you need?
Well, that was like 25 minutes on like 5 girls teams. A couple good boys teams in your area also. We'll start with Class B, Anacoco. Coach Tinsley coming back where he led them to 2 championship games. We got a profile on him coming out in the next couple days or so. Man, what a season they've had to be the number 1 seed at this point. They have a couple games left in Class B. How awesome has been that to see, and who maybe their biggest challenge now? Zwally, they have a lot of familiarity with. What are you looking for as that tournament starts?
Yeah, look, obviously the 2 years, he took them to the championship. They ran into Zwally, and it's not like, they hadn't beaten Zwally during the year. I think it was rubber match on both times, and it's obviously they played once each at, it's 1-1. But man, the first thing that stands out, you've seen them play. They're just so long. Good luck getting to the basket. You'll settle for a ton of jump shots. The thing is, this past week they played 3 games. They played at Fairview. I think they were down 7 at halftime. They allowed, I believe, 7 points in the second half. They played Ebarb the next night, and they allowed 5 in the third and 0 in the fourth. They were in the game Friday night at home against Fairview. Same opponent again. Fairview came out, and that's another team. If Fairview could, the boys, man, I've seen them at Pitkin and at Anacoca now. They've had some great first halves, just kind of run out of gas in the second half. But it was a 1-point game at halftime, and I believe Fairview scored 9 points in the second half. So in 3 games this past week, they gave up, I believe, 21 points. So that's in a basketball game.
Yeah.
So in the second half, they're averaging 7 points on defense allowed. So good luck getting to the basket. But you talk about the whole of Class B. Look, Hicks is another team that's really good. They beat Anacoca a couple of weeks
Addison
ago.
Kaufman looking like not just a great baseball player, but like one of the best basketball players.
He can shoot it. He can get going early. Kane Hagen's the same way. Like I think at Anacoca, he knocked down a couple shots in a row early. They can shoot it well outside. Like I said, they've already beat him once. But then, like I said, with that District 4B, it's kind of the same way with the Pitkin boys. They take. Honestly, I don't know if the seeding's going to work out, but I told Coach Johnson at Pitkin, you and Hicks have been to overtime and double overtime in the last 2 games, so let's just sign up for 7 of those.
Play another one.
Hicks gets the big win against Anacoca at home, and then they go to Pitkin the next week and they lose in double overtime. So, again, it's just so competitive. But like you said, you look at Zawali, and I mean, we all know Zawali is basically the Fairview of boys basketball, but the team that won the whole thing last year, Lacassine, I got to look at them earlier in the year. They graduated a lot, but man, they had 8 or 10 guys come off and just shoot the lights out of it. So it's, again, as wide open as it is, as good as Anacoca is, as good as Wally is, like those teams, like good luck getting there. Like getting there is going to be an achievement in itself just because of the depth. And like I said, you can't sleepwalk in the first half of a game. Like, Anacoca was a 1-point game, and then obviously, hey, let's put the clamps down, and that's what they did. But you can't, they're going to play at their place all the way through. But it's going to be so competitive, and like I said, Coach Tinsley being back, man, he's such a good coach. I don't know how he doesn't lose his voice every day.
I don't know how he doesn't lose it in practice.
Yeah, because, the games are one thing, but yeah, he's doing this every day, and you could tell, man, just the intensity he brings. They value the basketball every single possession, and that was the thing. Fairview got down a little bit the other night, tried to they got frustrated, starting to rush shots. Well, they'd miss, Anacoca would go down, and they'd even pass up a high percentage shot for a better one. They'd put that in, Fairview would go back down, frustrate them again, and next thing you know, that 1-point game at half ended up being a 20-plus win. And that's just, if they're able to do that and get a lead, good luck, because there's not a whole lot of shots going in the second half.
I think everyone in Class B also a little relieved that Avoyelles Charter is not
no doubt.
They win back-to-back titles. They lose a good game to Lacassine last year in the finals, and Oki and Armani head over down the road to Marksville. Landon Tinsley, who I can't believe, I stood next to him on Friday. I cannot believe he's only a freshman.
Yeah,
and he is. When I'm starting to fill out the All-Cenla ballot, how many names do you have to write before him? And he is only a freshman, and he can dunk, and he's dominating, and could he be that next player who wins 3 of 4 championship MVPs and really breaks out of that area of the state? Yeah,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because you start to look at how they match up, and Zawali very athletic, and the last couple of times they've gone down there and lost to them, they have trouble scoring too. Like Zawali does just enough, to get that 2 or 3 possession lead, and Anacoca just hadn't been able to score. The problem is now they've got the freshman that's as big as he is. By the way, I'm still waiting on my growth spurt, so it's probably not going to happen. But watching him the other night,
he's not done. He said
no, probably not. Like I said, from his 7th grade year when he started at Anacoca, he was playing a lot. And then coming back this year, he's shot up. And just watching him the other night, and a few times this season, he's such a great passer. The way they kind of got Fairview to kind of collapse, they just kind of dump it in to him, and they've got length everywhere, but he'd get it, and if you didn't collapse on him, he would just take you off the dribble or back you into the block and put it up. Or he was such a willing passer, and it was almost to the point where I was kind of thinking to myself, he's a little too unselfish. He could probably go get his if he wanted to, but man, they've got such good players outside. Ethan Pritchard's really good. Caleb Taylor's been starting for a while. He was one of the better players the last time Anacoca went and played Zawali in that final. They really couldn't get anything else, and he was just out there and kind of kept them in the game. So, he's a year older, and it's an experienced team for Coach Tinsley. And like I said, if they're able to score with Zawali, they've got a really good chance. But like I said, you got to get there.
It's going to be awesome. Sean, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, just basketball. This is going to be an unbelievable tournament in Division IV non-select, Class B, Class C. We're going to be listening to you. Where can people listen to you?
Yeah, so 105.7 FM, Today's Country, out of Leesville. Like I said, we cover Vernon, Beauregard, Allen Parish. So when I'm down there, especially for Hammond, I'm down there all week. You've seen me down there. It's just we're so well represented. And I say this every time I go down there, we bring the biggest crowds. You look at all the schools down like New Orleans area, Shreveport, like they'll bring the crowds just off of school size, but that sense of community is just not really, it's not there like it is with, I mean, these places like literally shut down to go down there, and they travel well. I'm looking forward to it. We have great kids. You know that. You've interviewed the kids and the coaches. Like, we just have such great kids in the area. They're great, they show great sportsmanship. Actually had a parent tell that to one of the coaches the other day after the game from the opposing school. Just walked up and said, "I just want to tell you about so and so." And man, like I watched him the whole second half, and he's a really good sport. And I just wanted you to know that. Like, we have a lot of high character kids in the area, and I think that's the thing that kind of goes just by the wayside a little bit, because they're good, yes, and they're gonna they bring home championships and runner-ups, and they get all these accolades on the court, but off the court they're all great kids. They really are.
It's the best part of the job.
Yep.
It's the best part, getting to talk to these coaches, parents, community members. They care a lot about basketball, and they get to see some good basketball too. Sean?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with the support of the community, because you look at all the programs that win, and you look at the ones that don't. The ones that don't should go and just watch a game of the teams that do. There's not a game where there's 5 people in the bleachers. Every single time they have a home game or an away game, those parents and family travel. And I mean, that's what it takes. It's not just rolling the ball out there and it's going to happen. Like, it takes the buy-in from everybody, and that's what we've had.
Thank you again.
Absolutely,
awesome.
man. A lot of fun.
I can't wait to hear you on the call.
Absolutely.